Good morning, everyone. Chris Gettle here, and joining me today is Todd Shell. Todd, I
Hey, Chris.
think we're actually like catching up to you guys in Texas weather-wise.
Yeah.
Like we had 70s and 80s this week. I was outside on my porch working most afternoons this week so far. I mean, springtime is, already past and we're like jumping into summer already up here.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's
Hey,
been nice here. It's sunny and it's in the 70s today, so not too bad.
okay. Yeah, I always see you and Ken talking about, all you Southerners with your nice temperatures all year round. I just wanted to, say that up here in Minnesota, we got nice weather too. It just takes a while for it to show up. There were a few jokes about didn't we just have snow last week? Yes, we did, and we'll probably have snow next week. But today it's sunny.
Enjoy it while you can, man. There you go.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. We are going to get started with the April Patch Tuesday update. For those of you who may be new to the series, we do have a couple of screens that you're going to be seeing pop up in there right now. You're seeing the slide screen. There's going to be an additional assets kind of screen that'll have things like our PDF download for today's presentation. As we're going through, if you do need any of those links that I'm going to be showing you guys very shortly here, you can grab those from the PDF. So it should be there and available for you guys already. There is quite a bit of news going on, so we're going to have a quick update on the circumstances leading up to Patch Tuesday, some of the news going on. There is a lot of CVEs that are being exploited. There's a lot of ransomware attacks going around right now. We want to give you guys a general update on which are the ones that you need to be concerned about and what you should be prioritizing. Then we're going to get into the updates from Microsoft, Adobe, and Mozilla. There are several updates that you'll want to take a look at there. And we'll get into some other kind of logistical things that you should be keeping an eye on if you're not already aware of, just to make sure that you don't have any surprises waiting out in the wings for you as you update this month. So, in the news, starting with that, Friday last week, April 7th, CISA started off with adding 5 new CVEs to their known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. This kind of was the starting point of our fun, we'll call it, for this month. At this time, I'm going to start to share my other screen here. So if you guys do need to resize screens, I'm going to spend less time on the slides and more time on the additional browser window for right now. So go ahead and resize things within your window if you need to make it so you could see a little bit better. I did increase the font size here, so hopefully that'll be easy enough for you guys to read. So starting with CISA, on the 7th, they released this update that had a number of CVEs that were identified. There was 3 CVEs for Veritas Backup Exec. These are 2021 vulnerabilities that are actively being used in a ransomware campaign right now. There was the Microsoft Certificate Dialog Privilege Escalation vulnerability from 2019 was added to the list, and an ARM GPU driver information disclosure vulnerability as well that were added there. So that is kind of the starting point of our fun for this month. Apple also started to announce several updates, starting with some updates that came out on Friday and some more that came out on Monday the 10th. And basically, it's all of the Apple OSs. So Mac OS, iOS, iPad OS. There are 2 known exploited vulnerabilities that are actively being targeted as a part of another ransomware campaign as well. So CVE 2023-28205 and CVE 2023-28206. Basically affecting all of the OS levels, and one of the vulnerabilities is also in the Safari browser. So you want to make sure to prioritize all of your Mac OS and Apple devices to get updated as soon as possible here. There's a couple of news links that we're providing here to give you some more details on those. The Windows 0 Day that's being actively exploited in ransomware attacks. That's the first link we'll throw at you here. This is that CLFS vulnerability. We're going to talk about this in more depth in a little bit here, but this is being used by the Nokoyawa ransomware family to basically exploit and get access to systems there. The vulnerability is a privilege escalation, gives the attacker system privileges if they're able to compromise that system. And this has been making it very easy for them to spread themselves across many systems and, launch their ransomware attack. So that is the Microsoft vulnerability that we'll be talking about. That's a 0-day this month. The ELF-V ransomware family is using those 3 Veritas backup exec vulnerabilities that were in the CISA KEV list. So that emerged in December of 2021. Originally, there were some vulnerabilities that were plugged back then. They're still actively being used now and are still not fully updated across most environments. So CISA has now put these 3 CVEs on their KEV list and is pushing very strongly for all U.S. federal and civilian agencies to get those plugged. Let me go into a little bit more detail about the Apple CVEs here. I thought I had this other link open, but let me pull up the latest Mac OS. So this is going to go into a little bit more detail in true Apple fashion. They never go into a lot of detail, but a little bit more detail about these 2 vulnerabilities. So the first one is the IO Surface Accelerator CVE. It allows an application to potentially execute arbitrary code with kernel level privileges. So this one is particularly nasty. It's an out of bounds write issue that basically the attacker could craft an application to throw some inputs at the kernel that basically go out of bounds of what should be allowed and break it in a way where they could start to execute arbitrary code. So this is a pretty nasty one there. And then the second vulnerability is the WebKit. This is in how a website could present content in a specifically kind of crafted way to allow the attacker to execute arbitrary code. So you may have heard the term use after free. It's basically in memory management. If memory is being managed properly, then these things should not be allowed. In this case, use after free is memory that was supposed to be freed up and then is still being abused by the attacker to do additional things. So both of those vulnerabilities are in the Mac OS, but also in the iPad OS and iOS versions. So both of those vulnerabilities are across all of those. Safari only has, I think, 205. Let me check and see. Yep, the Safari update here just has the WebKit vulnerability, so that's the 28205. So all of the Apple OS levels, both vulnerabilities, the Safari browser, just the WebKit CVE affects that one, but that's definitely putting all of our Apple and Windows OSs up at a top priority this month. Again, active ransomware campaigns targeting all of these CVEs, so definitely prioritize those as quickly as possible this month. The next slide here, we're going to talk a little bit about Exchange. So Exchange on-prem, we'll talk about that for just a minute here. The 2013 version of Exchange has reached end of support with April's Patch Tuesday release. So if you haven't already started to migrate from Exchange 2013 to either Exchange 2019, Office 365, or Microsoft 365, start planning to do so. With this, the more important thing that's going to be happening right now is Microsoft is instituting a new throttling and blocking of email from persistently vulnerable Exchange servers to Exchange Online. This has been met with a lot of trolls throwing, Microsoft under the bus for, monopolizing the email industry, blah, blah, blah. I don't really I have a very specific view on this, and it's that, security of software is, critical. There comes a point where any technology kind of exceeds the architecture that it was originally designed for. There's been a lot of research on Exchange. We've talked about this with proxy not shell, proxy shell before that, the Hafnium exploits. Many of those we've talked about before. I do believe that on-prem Exchange's architecture is just fundamentally no longer able to keep up with modern threats. There's been lots of independent researchers that have confirmed the same. It's overprivileged, it's complex. People don't know how to manage it very effectively to really lock it down, especially in light of how skilled some of these threat actors are. A group like Hafnium knows more about Exchange than most Microsoft developers still remaining at the company. They're good at it, they know their way around it, and they know how to abuse the hell out of it. So what Microsoft is doing is trying to push people to either keep their Exchange systems up to date and reduce the vulnerability exposure, or yes, they will throttle and potentially block you. So this is the new kind of article that came out here that I wanted to make sure that people are aware of. If you are running on-prem Exchange, Microsoft published this on March 23rd, and what it's saying is on-prem Exchange sending emails to Exchange Online is subject to throttling and potentially being blocked if it does not meet, good kind of security standards. So in this case, I'll kind of skip down to the punchline here. There's a reporting level, throttling level, and then a blocking level if you do not comply with keeping your Exchange environments up to date. The reporting level, it's going to basically start doing that. Hey, your Exchange server is not up to the latest. It's potentially exposed to multiple vulnerabilities. You need to get that updated. And then they'll start throttling how much email your on-prem Exchange can push through Exchange Online. After a while, it switches over to blocking. And then last, it will go to enforcing non-compliance. Like now you're 100% blocked if you did not comply within 90 days. 90 days seems pretty reasonable, for Microsoft to say, hey, we're going to warn you, and then we're going to start throttling how much you can send out, and then we're going to outright block you if your Exchange server is, really vulnerable. So that's really what they're trying to say. People are, I actually included this just so you could see kind of what some of the articles are talking about, but this article talks about this blocking of unsupported Exchange servers from sending emails to Exchange Online. The comments that start flying around down here, Microsoft is not going and just blocking people because they're not paying them money. They're blocking people who are not keeping their Exchange environments up to date. That's really the bottom line here. So, again, I've got the links in there. So if anybody needs some additional information about it, I've got the end of support link along with the Microsoft announcement on the 23rd about the throttling and blocking, and then the news article here that kind of shows some of the feedback that people are sending out. And it looks like, I'm not sure if this person is with Microsoft, but it looks like their comment is indicating that they may be, but they're saying it's not forcing you to upgrade or purchase anything. We're saying that a persistently vulnerable Exchange server cannot be trusted, and therefore email from them cannot be trusted. And there's good justification as to, needing to be able to do that. So, just a quick note here. If you're not seeing the PDF, Jenna just informed me that, some people may be needing to refresh your screen to see the PDF in the downloads tray. So if you're not seeing that, go ahead and refresh, and you should be able to get that PDF. Apologies if you're not getting that. All right. There's a couple of other changes that are either reaching a later stage or, changing as well. These have been talked about, at a few different points in the past, but we did reach another stage in the net logon protocol changes. relating back to a 2022 CVE. And the point that we're at right now, we've reached April 11th here. So November, there was the initial phase where they kind of announced this change was going to be coming, changing from the net logon doing kind of a its normal validation to switching over to this new require seal kind of variable. So that's kind of the first stage here as they announced it. With April 11th, this is the initial enforcement phase. With the OS updates this month, there is a new key. It's going to be entered in with a value of 0 to require require seal for net logon. So that's kind of the first stage of this. They'll be removing the ability to disable RPC sealing through that registry key. The next stage is going to be coming in June. The require seal registry subkey will be moved to enforced mode unless administrators explicitly configure to be under compatibility mode. So leading up to June, if you have a concern about this, you've identified some compatibility issues or something like that, you have some time to set it to compatibility mode for the time being, so that when that enforcement goes into default mode, you will still have the ability to go into compatibility mode. On July 11th, that's when they're going to be removing the ability to set a value of 1 for that require seal subkey. This enables the enforcement of this change. So again, a couple of stages left here, but leading up to July, make sure that you have tested with and determined if you guys have any impacts that are possibly going to happen because of those net logon protocol changes. If you're good to go, then you're set. If you do have some issues, make sure to get into compatibility mode before June, and make sure that you've got some kind of a path to get issues resolved before July, because that's the time frame that we're kind of running up against there. The second one here is certificate-based authentication changes on Windows domain controllers. So there was some updates here back in December up to January, and now we've got the latest change coming around here in, let's see, they changed removal of the disabled mode from February to April. So that was the big change here, is April was now that the removal of the disabled mode. So you can't run it disabled after the April update. Again, they've got kind of some details down here. The compatibility mode. So the enablement phase starts with April 11th. That was our Patch Tuesday release this month. It's going to now ignore disabled mode that was available up until now. So now you've got compatibility mode or full enforcement mode. So the full enforcement mode will transition to that on November Patch Tuesday 2023. So again, kind of a phased approach to this. Microsoft understands that these are some pretty radical changes at a very fundamental level of network authentication and protocols and things. So they need to help people adjust or give time to do that. So those are a couple of key changes that you should be aware of this month. Again, we've got the links to those KB articles for you to take a look at as you're rolling out this month's updates. Some of those modes are changing. So if you were running disabled for the certificate-based authentication, that's no longer optional. And now you're going to have to go into either the compatibility or full enforcement mode for that. So, okay, getting into today's CVEs. The first one.
Hey, Chris, before you go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
There were a couple of questions around that. Does the require seal appear after the April update? That was one of the questions, because they're not seeing it on their domain controllers.
Got it. So.
Did it say anything about that?
Yeah. April 11th, the April 11th update will remove the ability to disable RPC sealing by adding this value 0 to the require seal registry subkey. It doesn't say that that's when the registry key will start showing up. but they didn't talk about the reg key in the November update. So it's possible the reg key may be showing up for the first time with the April update. So if you're not seeing that reg key, let's see here. After Windows updates are dated on November 8th, the following registry key is available for the NetLogon protocol on Windows domain controllers. Okay, so it's saying that that registry key should have been available after November 8th. And the change that's happening is you'll no longer be able to set the value of 0. It'll remove the ability to disable RPC. So the value 0 is disabling. So in this case, some registry keys, if they're not there, it's going to behave on a default. So that default, whatever the default was, if you never changed it, that's what it is. That could be the case you're seeing there, is the registry key is just not showing up because it's just running as the default. You haven't added or modified it in any way. Microsoft may have some details on if it's not there, what you can do there. But if you add the registry key using these details, you should be able to add it and put in the compatibility mode setting on there. So that would probably be the best way to do that. I would expect that if you're not seeing it since November, the reg key not being there means it's going to run as the default, and the default was 0 previously. Starting with April, the default should now be 1, is my understanding. And then, with July, they're going to remove the ability to set that value to 1, and it will just go into a value of 2 as the default. So if you're not seeing the registry key, most likely it's just a matter of you haven't had a reason to set it, so it may not be there by default, and the OS is just using the default. Did we have any other questions about any of those, Todd, that you saw?
That was the only one that I saw, Chris, about that particular one.
Okay. Looks like Matt had a question. So the article does show the registry key there, the require seal registry key, and the 3 possible values you can set. Again, with April, you can't use the disable option anymore. You now get an option of 1 or 2. So compatibility mode, probably the safest bet to go with right now until you've tested and confirmed no other issues occur. But come July, they're going to switch over to 2 being the only possibility there, enforcement mode.
Yeah, I see Ken had a comment in here too. He said, I have a ticket open with Microsoft for this issue. The key is available for manual installation, but not implemented via Microsoft updates. That's what he's been told. Still a lot of confusion around this one.
Okay, so apparently, you're not the only ones then. There's, if you manually add the key, it should probably work. But again, it seems like there's some potential issues out there. So if you are having challenges on that, it may be a case where you need to open a case with Microsoft as well. I don't know if that require sign or seal is the same key. This article only talks about require seal. So Mike, on that one, I'm not sure about a require sign or seal reg key. I don't know if that was like an earlier state of it and they've changed it now, but the key in this article is specifically that require seal. Okay. All right, moving on to today's CVEs, we've got, I don't know if that was the right, there we go. This is the one I was looking for. WinVerifyTrust Signature Validation. It's an oldie but a goodie. So this was originally introduced back in 2013. Basically, there were a lot of ways that signature validation could encounter, a lot of dirty metadata on a file, a signed file. Microsoft had cleaned up and implemented a way to kind of better enforce signature validation on systems, it met with mixed results. So over the past 10 years, Microsoft has changed their stance on this. You can see the details of the original CVE from 2013 and some of the updates that came out of there. So they released the original one. On July 2014, Microsoft announced that it no longer planned to do a hard enforcement of the stricter verification behavior. And to this date, they've kept this as an opt-in feature. What this means is, hey, if you've got an environment that has some pretty clean software, well signed, easy to validate using the more strict validation rules, turn it on and great, you're good to go. A lot of environments had software in there that did not meet that stricter validation requirement set. So met mixed results in doing that. So Microsoft acknowledged that and backed off of a hard enforcement. It's now just an opt-in option. What they've changed this month, the only thing that changed with this month is the fact that they went and added all of the server core editions to the affected products list for this CVE. So you can see here, server core, all of these. This is the change that happened this month, was just these, really being added to that. They have it down in the notes there. Security updates table added the server core installation versions of the following operating systems for Server 2008, 32-bit, Service Pack 2, and so on. So that's the change that happened this month. If you evaluated this in the past and determined that you were going to not opt in or opt in, that decision probably can still stand as it was. The only change that you need to think about now is if you did opt in, then you want to go and look to your server core editions and make sure that you've applied this change to those as well to opt those in, and just make sure that, by opting in on those, that you're not going to run into any issues. Most likely, if you've opted in for the rest of your environment, doing so for the server core editions should be even, easier, because core is typically a lighter weight and cleaner version of things than most other server OSs. It's kind of the nature of core. But that's the only change on this one. Yes, it has known exploits against it. It's kind of a way that some of the supply chain attacks have happened over the years, where an attacker goes in and is able to slip things in a way where they can get by with just enough information in there to make their file look like it should be trusted. So that's some ways that could be abused. But yeah, that's the only real change there. Otherwise, no, it's not like the vulnerability changed and you need to reassess the whole thing. So just kind of more of an FYI there if you need to know about that one. The other CVE that released this month, this is the one that the CISA KEV list added. This is the Windows Common Log File System Driver Elevation of Privilege Vulnerability. Attackers are actively using it in ransomware attacks right now. If they use it, they gain system level privileges. So basically they own that box if they exploit it. It is affecting all of the currently supported Windows OS versions. So this is what's putting your OS update for the Windows platform this month as a high priority. So that is the Windows Common Log File System Driver vulnerability. The other two that we've got in there are public disclosures. None of them are new. They're basically changes per Microsoft's previous release. They've basically added, for the open source curl, they added some additional OS additions to the products affected list. So that one, where is it? I had these in order and apparently I messed it up at some point, but they just updated the list of OSs that are affected by that open source curl vulnerability. Same thing with the message queuing remote code execution vulnerability. They have, if I can scroll down far enough. That one's a new one. Microsoft message queuing remote code execution vulnerability. Why did I? Oh, this was because of another question I had from somebody this morning, not something I had planned to talk about here. This one was, if you are seeing anything about this one, this was probably the highest CVSS rating this month, and that's why it came up. I was on talking with a media outlet this morning about this one. 9.8 CVSS rating. They were asking, why is this one so dangerous? In this case, this vulnerability is able to be attacked over the network, requires no privileges, no user interaction. It's kind of a perfect vulnerability, remote code execution. No public disclosures or known exploits against this one right now. They were just kind of looking at hey, tell me about this one. It looks pretty nasty. So if you have concerns about this one, look down to the mitigation details below. To exploit this, the system needs to be enabled this Windows component needs to be enabled. So the Windows message queuing service needs to be on and running at the time. And if you are able to see that message queuing, it'll be listening on TCP port 1801 on the target machine. Again, that's what makes this thing dangerous. Is it's an actively listening port when the service is turned on, remotely exploitable without authentication or user interaction. So potentially wormable into the systems that are running this, right? So that was why that one came up in there. I think that was all of the updates that I had about today's updates. So Todd, think we'll switch over to you. The end of lives, we don't have anything new this month. 2012 is still, it's out there, it's coming. If you do have Server 2012 and you're going to be extending support, just like we did for Server 2008 and Windows 7, we will be offering ESU coverage to those customers who are going to be paying Microsoft for the continued support. You could subscribe to our ESU content as well for Server 2012 when it end of life later this year. So if you are already planning for that, reach out to us and we can work out the details there. Let's see, 20H2 next month.
One more month.
Yeah, we got one more month of 20H2, and then that'll be coming up, and then 21H2 the following month in June. So a couple of Windows 10 branches coming up on their end of support. So make sure you're keeping those moving ahead. All right, over to you for the bulletin update.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Hey, everybody. We go through some of the high-level, third-party updates to start with here. Chris did mention that Adobe Acrobat and Reader dropped yesterday. They generally have about a quarterly update, sometimes some minor updates on the off months, but being April, it's the start of the second quarter, so they had a large update. 16 different vulnerabilities, 14 of these were rated critical. So important that if you're using these, which almost everybody is, make sure that you run through your usual Adobe Acrobat and Reader updates this month. Chris also mentioned earlier, you saw on our graphic, there was a major update for Firefox. In this case, it happens to be 1.12. We rated it as critical. They rated it as high. 22 different vulnerabilities, and take a look at those. A lot of those were rated as high as well. I think about a third of them. Those 22 were rated as high by Mozilla. So definitely an important one to get out this month if you're a Firefox user. If you're on the extended service side of Firefox, there was also an update for ESR 102.1.10, and only 13 vulnerabilities this month. 12 of those overlap with the update on the 22 from the normal Firefox version. Again, also rated high by Mozilla there. So if you're running on the ESR version, make sure you get that updated. Moving into the Windows updates for the month, we did see Windows 11, of course, continuing update their two versions, the 21H2 and the 22H2 versions. Large number of vulnerabilities this month, 59 addressed in the Windows 11 update. Chris did mention the 2013-3900 vulnerability that was reissued, obviously around the WinCert Verify there. The new one, of course, is the known exploited one, 2023.28.252. And then the other one that was reissued as well. Chris talked about that in quite a bit of detail, so I won't go through all those, but I highlight them in red, so when you're going through our slides and you take a look at them, you can take a look at what's going on there. We haven't seen a lot of issues with 21H2, which is the first version that was obviously released for Windows 11. But this month they did have an issue that we saw last month for 22H2, which is this application fail issue, particularly around once you've updated these third-party UI customization apps. Explorer, Patcher, and Start All Back had issues. Basically, they tell you to uninstall and reinstall them if you're having an issue. They're investigating and will provide more details in the future, of course. Now, the most important problem. I know all you enterprise users out there, there's a big issue with Red Dead Redemption 2. If your users are having problems, it's hard to believe that Microsoft would call out a specific app like this, a game app, as part of a known issue. But they did this month, and there is a workaround. You can go back out to Rockstar Games and update your game, and it will work fine on the new version. So just so you're aware of that one.
Hey, the gaming industry is probably even noisier of a following of Update Tuesday than all of you regular IT folks.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm out there searching for stuff, I usually have to weed through a couple of gamer posts about updates breaking things. So
always fun stuff. On the 22H2 side, these first two issues have been around for the last couple of months. The provisioning issue when you update, as well as the slow copy issue. Haven't seen anything really on any new progress in addressing these particular issues. And that application fail problem that I said earlier that had shown up here last month and now is showing up on the 21H2 version as well. So if you run into those, basically it requires an uninstall, reinstall of the apps themselves that are being impacted. Windows 10, again, another large update. Like Chris said, lots of vulnerabilities addressed this month. 74 on the Windows 10 side across all the various operating systems. Same CVEs that were addressed under Windows 11 show up here under Windows 10. I have them highlighted in red for you. As far as known issues, we've seen this cluster update issue around for a while where the service doesn't quite start up. It will restart itself over time, but you can go in and manually update it as well and get it to restart if you do run into a problem. This is on the 2019 versions of products on the Windows 10 side. Something new this month that I hadn't seen before, they did particularly call out a kiosk login problem, and it didn't show up previously, although they now say that installing updates that released January 10th or later. So this must be something that they're kind of retroactively identifying as a new issue. And basically, your kiosk won't auto log on automatically. So you might get the request to sign in the screen prompting for credentials if you're running in kiosk mode. So kind of be aware of that one, if that's something important in your environment. We saw both of these issues last month with Server 2022. The missing server update services issue has to do with connecting to the new approach that they're taking with the update services, the WSUS servers. So if you run into this particular issue, be aware of it. There was also an issue around ESXi, VMware ESXi on Server 2022 may not start up properly. So they're also working on this particular issue, and they have some workarounds identified. Moving on to the legacy operating systems. This was kind of interesting. This was the first time I've seen more CVEs addressed on I'll say a legacy operating system than there were on a new operating system. So it looks like Microsoft is ramping up, getting ready for that end of life on Server 2012. There were 62 vulnerabilities addressed this month, huge number. So if you are running Server 2012, make sure that you go in, make sure you apply these updates. Some overlap again with the known exploited and publicly disclosed vulnerabilities we talked about earlier. So they do have updates rated critical for the monthly roll-up version, as well as the security-only version of Server 2012. They did call out specifically when I was reading through the KB articles yesterday that there is a known compatibility issue with certain GDI printer drivers. It's not something that they're specifically going to fix, so they don't call it out as a known issue per se that they have to address. But if you are running printers and you run into some problems, kind of be aware of that particular issue. 62 vulnerabilities for both the monthly roll-up as well as the security-only update for Server 2012. Same overlap with the 2012 R2. So again, you'll see the same 62 vulnerabilities here. I went through and looked at the list that they addressed. And there is, of course, the monthly roll-up for 2012 R2, as well as the security-only update for this particular one. Again, they're only supporting the server versions anymore. They have dropped support for Windows 8.1 back in January of this year. So I don't think many people were using it, and they decided not to support it anymore. So again, only supporting the 2012 and 2012 R2. And as Chris mentioned on the previous slide when he was going through the end of life, that these will be supported under the ESU program starting after October Patch Tuesday of this year. Moving on to the Office side, on the click to run side or the online versions, obviously Office 365 apps, 2019 and the 2021 long-term service channel versions. They did provide an update, of course, dynamically as usual on the click to run versions. They did address 4 vulnerabilities this month, none of which were publicly disclosed or known exploited, so that's always good. So these are downgraded or rated as important. The actual issues were in Publisher, in case you're wondering. A number of vulnerabilities there. And of course, they also provided the updates for Microsoft Office, the on-premise versions. We have the 2019 and 2021 for Mac, long-term service channel version there. And as I said, the updates are actually in Microsoft Publisher 2013 and 2016, these 4 particular vulnerabilities. So if you're running Publisher and you run into some issues there, you might want to update and make sure you get that. Otherwise, again, not nearly as important. I should say that. Rated important, but not critical this month to do your Office updates. Finally, we did have an update for SharePoint Server. It was just a single vulnerability. It's not publicly disclosed or known exploited as well, related to a spoofing issue. And this is where basically an attacker is able to redirect a victim to a malicious site. But be aware of this one, again, only important this month on the SharePoint server side. So with that, it was a pretty short set of bulletins, although as you saw, there were a large number of vulnerabilities addressed this month across Windows 10 and 11 and Server 2012. So if you are running those operating systems, make sure you get those critical patches deployed. Chris, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Todd. So for those of you who might be new to this, this last part here, we talk about the between the Patch Tuesdays. So this is everything that happened in the last month after Patch Tuesday leading up to this. Gives you kind of an idea of what other updates you might want to make sure get caught up in your maintenance cycle this month. Google Chrome had 2, Nitro Pro Enterprise, Python, SeaMonkey, and Thunderbird, all with updates there. So as you're getting into this, Mozilla released, on Patch Tuesday, but Google Chrome did resolve several vulnerabilities over the last couple weeks here as well. So make sure that you're getting up to your latest Chrome release in this cycle as well. Nitro Pro and Nitro Pro Enterprise resolved 2 vulnerabilities. Python, a couple of different branches there, each resolving 2 vulnerabilities. SeaMonkey resolved 10, and Thunderbird resolved 1. So those are your additional third-party updates that you want to make sure are captured in this as well. We talked about the Apple updates that started releasing last Friday and Monday this week. And one other thing to note is this is the next month of Oracle's quarterly patch update cycle. So next week on the 18th, Oracle does their release cycle on the Tuesday closest to the 17th of the first month of each quarter, if I got that right. So January, April, July, October. With that, you're going to see all of the Oracle platforms are going to get updated. All their middleware, Java Runtime, and Java JDK, all of those are going to get updated. With that, all of your Java alternatives are also going to get updated. So Red Hat Open JDK, Azure Zulu, Amazon Corretto, all of the different Java frameworks are going to start to update as of next week when Java gets released. there will basically be a domino effect of additional updates. So between now and next Patch Tuesday, expect a steady stream of additional third-party updates and things that'll be coming your way. All right. On that note, let's go through and make sure we've got all the other questions answered. We've been getting to quite a few of them. Regarding the signing vulnerability, that was let me get back to it. I'm just going to share this comment because I think the WinVerifyTrust Signature Validation. So I was kind of the first verticals that I went to with this one, with enforcing more strict signature validation, was healthcare, manufacturing, verticals where they've got a lot of custom software, and sometimes those shops are smaller and not as clean about how they're signing and validating things. I actually had a comment from one of our viewers here today. Let me get back to it here. Matthew said that they've implemented the WinVerifyTrust, and then they're a healthcare organization, and they do have quite a variety of software applications in their space. They do have a wide variety of kind of random weird software and everything like that, and he said that they were able to turn it on with no issues. So even in complex environments like healthcare, yes, that can be done. So just wanted to share that with everybody, that that one isn't completely daunting there. It can be done, and some complex environments are doing it. So good info to share there. Thanks, Matthew. Todd, any others that you see that we want to call out?
Let's see here. There's a question here: for not using certificate-based authentication, do we ignore the KB you were talking about, or is it still something that's going to hit us indirectly? That's a good one.
Yeah, and that's similar to
issue.
Another person's question too about, hey, is this going to make it so that Server 2003 and 2008 systems can no longer connect to the domain? Okay, so they started doing the audit events back in May 2022. Enablement phase is starting with the April 11th update, which will ignore the disable mode. So you can't, I mean, it does sound like they're saying you don't get to just, ignore this. It's coming for kind of everyone. So they went into the compatibility mode as of the April release. That's the best you can do, is compatibility mode now. And yeah, with full enforcement coming in November, that will start to, if a certificate cannot be strongly mapped, authentication will be denied. So I would say don't ignore it, is my best advice there. Definitely look into it and make sure that, your environments won't be affected by those changes. But it sounds like, yeah, they're definitely enforcing the stronger authentication type here going forward. Yeah, Microsoft doesn't exactly answer all of those questions in plain text very, very well sometimes. The best I can interpret, yeah, it is going to affect everyone as they get towards November. So, there were a couple of questions about speed at which, so our guidance is the Apple updates and the Windows OS updates this month, all the Veritas backup updates as well. I know we're not talking about that one here, but if you are running Veritas backup exec, those 3 CVEs, all of the 6 that we were talking about there today, the 3 from Veritas, the 2 from Apple, the 1 from Microsoft, are all actively being used in ransomware campaigns already. My best guidance to you is, you're rolling the dice with each day you delay. The sooner you can get the OS updates this month rolled out for both your Windows and your Apple devices, the better off you're going to be. You're not guaranteed to be hit, but it's these days we can't say if, we have to deal in when. Even if you talk to Microsoft, they talk about assuming that there's threat actors in their networks already and making decisions based on that type of information. Assume you've already been compromised. What you're trying to do is to take low-hanging fruit off the table. So if you're looking at a risk-based approach to this, these are definitely a top priority, should be resolved as quickly as you can roll it out without breaking the business as a whole, right? So yeah, roll it out. And if you get through your pilot phase very quickly, forge ahead as quickly as possible with the OS updates this month would be my best guidance there. If your organization is not used to running at that pace, do the best you can. That's the best guidance I can give. But there were at least 2 or 3 people kind of asking a similar question there. That's the type of guidance that I would give anybody from your level all the way up to a CISO or a CEO of a company that we would talk to as well. That's the type of guidance that we would give. If you haven't looked at, I try to keep this series from going markety. That's not my intent with this. There's a reason that we have acquired the risk-based vulnerability management platform that we did and started to bring those types of capabilities into Ivanti's patching technologies. The risk-based approach is focused on trying to identify that real-world risk and accelerate remediation for those things to try to stay ahead of threat actor behavior. Just like social media, we can monitor trends amongst threat actors. And with that information, we can tell you, don't worry about all 97 new CVEs that Microsoft resolved this month. Really, the top one that you need to worry about is that 2023-28252, the common log file system driver. That's your number one vulnerability out of those 97 that you really need to care about. When you push the OS update, yes, you take care of a lot of the other ones, but that's the one you want to worry about. And that's what you're basing your decision on deciding to move faster or stay at your normal pace of remediation. My guidance would be try to move faster this month if you can. All right. Chad asked the question about the Exchange blocking throttling. Yes, to the best of my understanding of it, only applicable to people who are running on-prem Exchange and basically running in a hybrid Exchange type environment. So that fits my understanding of the situation there as well. All right, and then Michael, follow up with me offline, and we'll talk more about your configuration question for how you're running your Ivanti consoles. Perfect. All right, Todd, do we have any other questions that are hanging out there?
I was glancing through. I think you got most of them, Chris.
Scott asked a good question. What's the downside to having Chrome and Firefox auto-update for organizations? Unless you've got some browser-based application experiences that tend to break on those updates, I would say no downside. Let the applications like Chrome and Firefox auto-update. I would caution you, though, that you can't rely on those auto-updaters by themselves. 2 things that commonly happen that will prevent those auto-updaters from doing what they do best. 1, users at some point need to close their browser to actually let that auto-updater happen. And that's something where, if you're like me, I oftentimes am working between so many different things, I will leave a browser tab open for days just to make sure that I have that thing that I was thinking about and I can go back to it. For any of us who work in a very interrupt-driven kind of way, that's just commonplace. And most of us kind of work in that type of mode nowadays. So that can prevent your auto update from occurring. The other thing that can happen, and it's happened many times over the years, the auto update mechanism in some of these browsers tends to break every once in a while. There have been spans of like 6 months at a time where Chrome or Firefox auto update feature was broken. So what do you do then? So I recommend in that case, Scott, yes, use the auto updaters for your Chromes, your Firefoxes, but make sure that you've got a patching solution that can come in and back clean up. Our solution will come in and detect that, hey, no, it hasn't been applied, and then you can actually do so. And then you've got the mechanisms that are built into our product to be able to control things like reboot to, force those things to happen so that changes get into effect and the remediation actually occurs. A combination is better, but definitely don't rely on those auto updaters by themselves. They are fundamentally limited in how well they can enforce. They try, but they just don't have the level of control needed in some cases. All right, I think Christian messaged that the Chrome auto update, they even got a script from Google for kind of running it as a scheduled task to do that. So that can help as well. I would say with things like browsers, if you can use multiple ways to make sure that those stay up to date. It's a user-based application. It's a web browser. It's one of the top, attack vectors out there as far as like taking advantage of, user-targeted vulnerabilities. So I always try to keep browsers as aggressively up to date as possible. You saw Google had 2 updates this last month. It's not surprising to see them with even 3 to 5 updates in a 1-month span. Using an auto updater makes sure that you catch those more frequently. So cool. All right, everyone. I think we have gotten through most of the questions that are out there. There's a couple of edge kind of cases there that we'll try to respond to via text here. But thank you for joining us this month. Appreciate your time. Again, if you need it, grab the PDF before you log out, and you'll have all the links that we shared today available in there. And you'll get the follow-up afterwards for those who weren't able to catch us live. It'll follow up with the recording as well and give you access to that information on demand. Thanks again, and we'll see you next month.
See you next month, everybody. Bye.